Good morning.
Good morning, Vets. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Luna, how are you?
Doing pretty good, ma'am. How about yourself?
Doing awesome. We're here to talk to you guys today about personal statements and winning personal statements. I am Senior Veteran Coach Elizabeth Hash, SVC Liz, for those in the know. I retired in 2020. I spent the last decade of my career in recruiting for the Army National Guard. And before that, I served in Signal and as a quartermaster. I joined in 2000. I was 17 years old when I joined the military. My dad was also in the military. So my whole life, I have been around men and women in the uniform. I really was scared to death when I came out, not knowing what I would do when I got out of the service because I'm not sure how to be a civilian. And I was blessed to find VACI shortly after and have been serving fellow veterans since then. I also signed up as a client when I came on as a coach and used our resources to reach 100% PNT. PNT is permanent and total. So that is my rating for life.
So, I'm Coach John Luna. I'm an Air Force vet. I had 4 years in active duty, Pope Air Force Base, and 6 years in Lackland in the reserves. Three deployments under my belt. So, I left after about 10 years of service. And I was very fortunate to find this job in Austin and came on board. And honestly, like at that point, I had already been through the VA process. I knew how difficult that process was, so having a job presented to me where I could help other veterans avoid a lot of the mistakes or a lot of the anxieties of going at it alone, just I mean, it fits like a glove. I love what I do now, and I love being able to make the process easier because going at it alone was so nerve wracking, was so confusing. So being in a position where I can help my fellow veterans, regardless of any era, has been exceptionally rewarding.
And
Mm-hmm.
Beverly posted in the chat that we had another member of our group hit 100% permanent and total this morning. So we celebrate together, and it's a community. We'd love to have you in our community if you're looking for that, not just to get your claim increased, but to be part of something where everybody's cheering you on and they're going through the same things. We're talking about personal statements. Personal statements can be really valuable, but they're not always necessary. I do recommend writing a statement regardless of whether or not you're going to submit it to the VA. And this is going to help you understand and articulate your symptoms. I want you to consider the person on the other end who's going to be reading that statement if you are going to be submitting it. And make your statement as concise and intentional as possible. If you're um, if you need to get all of the big details out of your head and onto paper, that's totally fine. Do it for you, and then pull the parts that are important to your claim for the statement that you submit.
The number one thing that I see veterans have a problem with personal statements and even buddy statements on this is sometimes they will either, they themselves will procrastinate on their claim thinking that they need to have it perfect. Or they'll have a friend who's going to write up a buddy statement who procrastinates and may or may not do it. So, buddy statements, depending on the situation, may not even be needed. If your medical evidence is strong enough to support what you're going for, then there might not even be need for a personal statement. If you're already service connected for a musculoskeletal condition, a personal statement won't really up your chances of getting it increased. It's all going to come down to how much that condition has diminished in range of motion. Also, be careful, especially with buddy statements and your own statement, that you're not saying something contradictory to the way that you're filing your claim. For instance, if you're filing something as a secondary and then you get a buddy statement that's talking about this condition from active duty, well, that's contradicting your argument. They could use that against your claim and say, well, we're reading that this statement is indicating that your condition should have been primary service connected, but you filed as a secondary. Now, that can harm your claim. So be very delicate with a lot of these personal statements as well. They are useful, especially, let's say, if you did injure yourself on active duty, you do have a confirmed event that the VA acknowledges, but you waited 5, 10, 15 years to go to the doctor for it. Personal statements are a great way to bridge that gap of time from when you left active duty to when you first started going to seek help. Vets are notorious for just putting up with physical pain, muscling through. That's what we learn. But there will come a point where your condition gets so severe that you have no choice but to go to a doctor. So that may be the same condition 15 years from now to when you first start going to the doctor. But the VA won't see it that way. They'll see it as, you got over it and you went to the doctor 15 years later for a new injury in the same area. So statements are a great way to bridge that gap to talk about the escalation. So be very strategic with the way that you use your statements.
And to add, with bridging that gap, adding a chronological timeline indicating, hey, I sought treatment about 2 years after at this place, but they don't have the records. Or I didn't seek treatment for a couple of years because I didn't have medical insurance and I couldn't afford it. I was treating it myself with over the counter medication, or I went to a chiropractor. I went to a whole health medical provider that wasn't covered by my insurance or doesn't keep records. You can tell your story, and that's where they're really valuable. But again, you want to keep it concise and to the point so that they don't have to read through all of the fluff to get to the meat and potatoes that they need in order to make a decision on your claim. And just to kind of break down the elements of a personal statement that you need, there are 4 things. The first thing you need to do is identify the condition. You need to have a current diagnosis, identify what that is. Here is my condition, and you're requesting for service connection. So you need to describe why it's service connected. Is it connected because there's something that's easily proven that happened while you were in service, an in-service event or stressor that you can prove that's maybe in your service treatment records, or it's documented in your personnel files, or it's documented via court or ER records, anything like that? Or is it something that's secondary to another one of your service connected conditions like Coach Luna alluded to earlier? And then you're going to describe the condition chronologically. Talk about how it's evolved over time. Talk about any treatment you've tried up to this point, as well as ups and downs in the severity. Then you're going to describe your current symptoms and their severity and impact on your life, not just occupationally, but socially as well. I would always recommend thanking the reader for taking time to consider your claim, but that's really basically what you need in a personal statement, those 4 elements. If you go beyond that, you're risking just boring the person reading it to tears. And, they're going to read these things, but have you ever read something that was repetitive or redundant and you just stopped, or you got lost and you're like, I don't know what I'm reading? And if you aren't sure how to do that, please click the link, check in with a coach, and see if we're able to help you. We do this a lot, and we know what works, and we're excited to coach you through this process. So click on the link, try it out, see if we're a good fit again. Another thing with your personal statement, you want to review the 38 CFR schedule of ratings for your specified condition and your medical evidence to make sure that your recollection of the events is accurate. And knowing what the rating schedule is allows you to draw out the details that the VA needs to hear or needs to read. Because when you're writing about these symptoms that aren't within the rating, that don't really matter according to the rating schedule, the rater or the person reading it, that's not relevant to what they're doing. Current medical records are important too. If you haven't been to the doctor in 30 years for anything, before you file a claim, get to the doctor. Get that stuff documented. Get a current diagnosis. Your statement should really come and point back to the golden circle. So you've all heard the Kaluza triangle, which is diagnosis, a current diagnosis, an in-service event, and the nexus, or that medical link between the two. Those are the three things that you need to have a successful claim with the VA. All of those combined are what you're trying to get across in this personal statement. You're not a medical professional. You cannot uh, submit an ironclad nexus, but you can tell them what you believe that nexus is. Why do you believe it's service connected? That's that very first piece. If you have medical evidence to support that, it's even stronger. So when we say that sometimes a personal statement's not necessary, that's because when you have all of those elements and you have the medical evidence, they don't necessarily need to see all of the details. And you were saying that your personal statement that you wrote was like 20 pages.
It was long.
Mine was seriously 4 sentences. It was this long.
Mm.
And that was on my very last claim. And I was like, I don't know if it's going to work, but these are really the only details they need. And I submitted it. And guess what? It went through in 2 weeks and it was
Nice.
approved. And granted, that's a unicorn. That doesn't always happen. Don't think that with a perfect statement or a really short statement that's going to be the result every time. But I was just thrilled and elated because I couldn't believe, hey, it worked. So if you are a visual person and need to see this in writing, it's available. There it is again. So click on that, check it out. It's got an example in there. It's great for your viewing pleasure and educational resource for you. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful day.
We're vets helping vets, so thank you.